thousand fangs he doesn't fear. Will steal his mission clear, crushing evil.
Your file is played.
Earth.
Okay.
I was gonna. Man,
Got it.
I already messed up, ladies and gentlemen. I was gonna play this. Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here with a certified board professional space cowboy. How is the gravity on Jupiter?
It's heavy. Pretty heavy.
I'm already. I want to say one thing before we start talking about your comics. I got the physical proofs for my comics. I got 5 comics, because there's 5 covers. And they look, guys, it for those of you who are making comics, it costs like $40 to get a proof. So right here is $200 worth of comics, worth every penny, because I looked at the files on my computer, and I didn't notice a couple of mistakes. Now, we could say all day long who made the mistakes, but we're not going to point to people who made the mistakes. But when you have the physical copies in your hand, oh my God, I would have been so embarrassed to put out such rookie, silly mistakes. So I talked to the Comics Wellspring people. They say as long as I get the new files uploaded tonight, I won't lose my place in time, so it won't put a delay in my comic. But oh my God, physical proofs, ladies and gentlemen. Learn from my horrible rookie mistakes.
Do you care to share what your mistakes were? Are they just typos?
A color correction on page 10. There was a color correction. No, they can still be typos that I just didn't notice yet. But there's color corrections. This page, the patriarch is flying off into space, and then Renzo put these close-ups of the face and then put frost on them, but they were colored red, so it looked like he had a rash. And I was like, no, it's supposed to be frost. So when I put in the color corrections, the lettering didn't get updated. So I had 2 files that I sent over to the pre-press guy, and he took the one that wasn't lettered. So this page got printed without the lettering, and you could tell the story without the words here. It's one thing I'm actually proud of is the storytelling, meaning the ability to figure out what's going on without the words is pretty good. But I did this on purpose to give you clues to how his powers actually work, to set up like issue 3. So I need the lettering, and so that
the lettering there on the PDF?
The lettering is on the PDF, but
okay,
the pre-press guy used it from a different file that I forgot to update. So I did it wrong. And the other thing is, it's hard to see, but it drives me crazy. There's not a full bleed. So up here, there's a black border, and over here, there's a black border, but there's not supposed to be. But the back cover is a full bleed. So 2 little tweaks that I obviously I saw the digital files, but I didn't notice. But when you get a physical proof in your hand, everything stands out like a sore thumb. Like, I was so excited, I ripped up. I'm like, but the proof's here. I'm showing my wife, and then I sit down. I'm like, oh. 2 mistakes that were my fault. I sent the wrong files, and so I can't get anybody. This guy made it, but it's funny because both guys I talked to, they're like, yeah, that's what proofs are for.
Yeah,
I'm freaking out, and they're like, yeah, we'll fix it. 5.
Yeah, that's the only
I'm not a
problem you have. You're doing well.
And let's address the chat over here. We got Zach Tan. Hope you're having a blessed day. Yep, I am. Actually, I am. Emily Kruger, who never ever sleeps. I think she's related to Freddy Krueger. She never sleeps. Anytime I go on YouTube, Emily is there. And Marcus, how you doing, Marcus? Old Dirty Fatty. Johnny, you back to work next week? I went to the doctor. I got an MRI. And then I have to go back to the doctor to check with the MRI, and she can't see me till Tuesday. So it looks like I'm taking off next week also. So I'm hoping to get cleared. I'm assuming that there's nothing wrong. I joke. She did an MRI of my brain, and we're gonna find nothing. That's been my running joke all week.
Do you still have the dizziness?
Yes, I still have the dizziness. My wife and I went to a cardiac. So I got my heart checked. I did the stress test and everything like that. And right away, everybody said, it's not your heart. Your heart is strong. You know, that's the, you could say whatever you want about my looks, whatever, but my heart is strong. So it's not my, so I don't know. What are the odds that I broke my neck and then I get dizzy when I turn my head? So there's something on my neck that is being missed or whatever, because it ain't psychological, because you can see my eyes, you know, when I get dizzy. But my wife just reminded me that we have potato chips upstairs, and I ran upstairs like the Dickens, and she goes, "Oh, you don't get dizzy for potato chips." So I said, "Oh yeah, that's the secret, honey. You got to load me up with potato chips and send me off to work." But
so she just leads you around with potato chips to get you to go where she wants.
Could it be a diet thing? Well, I mean, why now would it be dizzy? Why would it be dizziness when I took off the neck brace, but I wasn't dizzy when I had the neck, and I wasn't dizzy before the accident? So if it was a diet thing, it would be pre-accident, you know. So it has to be something because of the accident. I forgot I talked about this live, but anyway, how you doing?
Good, John. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Like I said, I'm happy to have my whatchamacallit, my proofs in my hand. Happy that I went to the doctor, got cleared for my heart is healthy as could be, and I'm trying to figure out why our names aren't coming up. But why not?
I'm probably jinxing the stream. I have that effect on technology.
Yeah, me too. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's because I was sharing something. Okay, cool. So anyway, how you doing, Steve? For those of you who don't know, is it okay that I call you Steve? I mean, because it says Space. I don't want to
call me Steve, Space Cowboy, Maurice, the original gangster of love, whatever you want.
You are and you speak the pompatus of love.
I do.
So I met you because you're friends with Brian Bao, who's man, is he kicking it right now on Kickstarter. He's doing phenomenal on Kickstarter. For those of you who don't know, Brian Bao is the creator of Wolf and Batsy, a comic that I just absolutely fell in love with. I've been pushing that comic like as much as I can. He's on Kickstarter for issue 13, and he's just about to hit $10,000. Oh my God, that is exciting.
He's at 9,000 this morning.
Yeah. I think he's up to 9,700 the last time I checked. But and you, how do you know Brian?
Brian was my roommate in art college at Columbus College of Art and Design.
Oh, cool.
Well, he was my sophomore year. Freshman year, it's kind of interesting. I was in the Army because I was going into college on the GI Bill. And so I got out of training late because they kept pushing back my training. And I got out of the Army like less than 2 weeks before first semester of art college. And so I got stuck in a room with 3 exchange students who all didn't get a visa. So I ended up having a 4-bedroom dorm to myself freshman year.
Nice.
And I was on the girls' floor. So everyone liked to come up and hang out at my dorm room because I had the Laserdisc player. I had a insane
Laserdisc. That was the cutting edge of technology, right?
It was back then.
Yeah.
I had an insane stereo, and I had, we shared bathrooms with the women, so everyone liked to come up to my dorm room. And then halfway through, I got moved into another dorm room when someone moved out, because they said it doesn't make sense for you to have, this big, spacious pad all to yourself. And Brian was in a lot of my classes. We liked a lot of the same music, liked the same comics. I think he wore a Skinny Puppy T-shirt like the first day.
That's his favorite band. Me.
His favorite band. I was like, oh, you like Skinny Puppy? They're awesome. And he's like, you're the first person who's ever heard of them. Because I used to listen to their albums on my headphones to go to sleep in the Army, which is kind of insane. But when you're in a barrack with 200 men, like you want something loud to just kind of get the noise of the snores and farts out of your head while you're trying to sleep at night.
Brian and I, first off, I fell in love with Wolf and Betsy comic. And then I reached out to Brian to see if he wanted to come on my channel. And we just hit it off. And no joke. I don't think there's a day that goes by that me and Brian don't message each other in some sort of capacity. To the point, if it goes like 2 or 3 days, Brian's like, is everything okay? And I'm saying the same thing to him because we felt. But one night we stayed up to like 4 o'clock in the morning just talking about music, sending each other songs and stuff like that. I like to think that was the night we became friends. And I was sending him obscure punk stuff, and he was sending me like Skinny Puppy. As much as I know music, I didn't really know them. So he was playing songs for, so it was a lot of fun. And I have to say that Brian is instrumental in my comic. He was the first person I sent the script to, and I told him, don't be nice to me, be as brutally honest. And then I regretted saying that because he was brutally honest and it hurt my feelings. But a day or two later, I realized that he was absolutely 100% right. And I rewrote my script. So if anybody reads my comic and says it's good, it's Brian's fault. If anybody reads my comic and says it's bad, it's also Brian's fault. So there you go.
Brian knows comics and he knows horror movies. He's an expert on those.
Yeah, I tried to stump him one night. I was like, okay, Brian, you think you're all right. So I did some, and I was like, all right, you win. I'm done. There's no way. He knows his horror movies. So
my wife hates horror movies, and she's actually at a union convention this week. So I'm catching up on all my horror movies that I'm not allowed to watch when she's home. So I'm discovering all sorts of new great titles.
My older brother is into horror movies the way I'm into comics. So he would probably get along with Brian, just he knows every. But when we were little kids, he's I'm 56. I think he's 61. When we were little kids, he would wake me up in the middle of the night. Hey, John, let's go downstairs and watch a horror movie, during the summer. So I was like, oh, my big brother's so cool. We're watching horror movies. It wasn't until like maybe a year later I realized he was just too scared to watch them by himself. So, back then we just got HBO. So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning watching horror movies. My parents are asleep. My father would wake up for work and we were still watching horror. We had to pretend to be sleeping, stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. A lot of bad horror movies. And we made it like a tradition. Every Friday the 13th movie that came out, we went to the movies. So I saw, I think every one up until like Freddy Goes to Space in the movie theater with my brother.
Yeah, brothers are good for that. I went to a neighbor's house and watched An American Werewolf in London with my brother when we were little. And we were scared to death. And then we had to walk like the block home. And we were so convinced that, there was a werewolf behind every bush.
Were you walking on the street and then you look down and you found out you were it on the street, like in the movie? And then you hear a dog barking. Man, I love the American Werewolf in London. I think that's the first movie I ever taped on VHS tape and watched over and over and over again. Oh man, nothing like practical effects for a horror movie.
Yeah, that still stands the test of time.
Yeah,
that and The Howling are probably my two favorite werewolf movies.
Yeah, and I think those are Brian's favorite too. I know The Howling is his inspiration for Wolf, from Wolf and Betsy.
And then I watched Dog Soldiers last night, which also has pretty good werewolves.
I haven't watched Dog Soldiers in a long time.
After you watch it once and you're impressed, the next time you watch it, you can see they really didn't have much of a budget, but they did a lot with very little.
Yeah.
Because like the wolves aren't always on screen when people are. There's like flashes to their silhouettes and stuff. It's really well done for low budget.
As much as I like the underworld movies, Kate Beckinsale and Tight Leather, what's not to like? But I think it would have been better if they just left out the werewolves, because they don't even show it. Like they hit like, okay, we're all werewolves, and then you see like shadows. They never show the werewolves. They show the vampires.
They don't have much fur. It's like all their werewolves caught mange because you can see their skin, and they just weren't convincing to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I like them, but I dislike them at the same time. I like movies with a lot of fake lore. Did you read the Interview with a Vampire books?
No.
The first one was kind of a chore. The second one wasn't that great, but the third one, when they started talking about the ancient history, and that's when I was hooked. But I like fake lore. I guess that's a comic book thing. Like I like the Silmarillion. When I read a Greek mythology, I used to, as a kid, write down, okay, this myth had to happen before this. Oh, wait a minute, but how was Jason part of this team if he wasn't born yet? I love figuring all that stuff out. I guess, I don't know.
I think I listened to part of one of the interview books as an audio book. For a while, I was working with Dabble Brothers, and so they were looking for different. If you remember Dabble Brothers, they would take popular horror fiction and make comic book adaptions. And so I was going through a lot of like horror books to try to find what would be great for them to adapt. So there was a book, I think it was called Bitten. I think it was Bitten, and it was a really well done werewolf book. And then I had Brett Booth read it because he was like their main artist, and he didn't like it at all. So we didn't get to adapt that one.
All right. So are you like, I obviously you're a comic book guy. Were you like Brian, who is into horror comics, or are you like me, like a superhero comics guy growing up?
Superhero, Marvel specifically. I guess you can't really see my spinner rack because I have my Halloween skeleton up, but
oh yeah. I didn't realize it was a spinner rack.
Yeah, I just picked that up at the Goodwill for $5.
Nice.
So I really lucked out.
I spent $300 on that spinner rack. When I built this basement, I was like, I finally have everything I want. I'm getting a spinner rack. And my wife's like, is it important? I was like, yes, it's important. But I had to go to Diamond, and Diamond wouldn't sell it to me because I'm not a comic book store. So I had to go to a local comic book store and ask them to buy it for me. But they were like, well, what if you don't pick it up? So I had to pay for it in full. They got it like 2 months later and then bring it home. But, I got it. I love it.
Yeah. Our library used to have one like you have, and they remodeled. And so I was going by their big dumpster and they threw it out. And I was like, okay, this evening when I take the dog for a walk, I'm going over to the trash and I'm getting that out. So I sneak over to the library, and someone had beat me to it. It was already gone.
My favorite trash story is my grandmother. She was in her 90s, and even everybody's like, "Guy, she had dementia." Well, my grandmother, she was daffy even in her 50s and 60s. So in her 90s, she says to me, "Oh, John, I was taking a walk around the neighborhood, and I saw a stack of comic books all tied up right out on the curb for the garbage. And I was going to pick them up and carry them for you, but there was too many. And then I figured, why bother? They were only worth 10 cents.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So I'm like, Nana, where? Like, I'm like, I must have been like 14. Where are these comics? Where? And then I realized it could have been yesterday. It could have been a year ago. It could have been 3 years ago. And it could also have not happened. So there you go. There's my garbage picking comic book story.
Yeah, we used to do paper drives as Cub Scouts. Like, people would drop off their newspapers and we'd load them into a semi. And someone dropped off like a huge bundle of Amazing Spider-Mans. And so I moved it like behind a stack of paper. So when we were done, I could get it. And one of the older Boy Scouts took it from me, and he was like, "Good find, Miller," and he took it, and I was sad I didn't get the comics.
Oh man, that would have been fist fights. That would have been.
Well, I was like 12 and he was like 16, and when you're 12, a 16-year-old,
yeah, that's a
like,
big age difference. Yes, I agree. I remember there was an auto body shop in my town. Matter of fact, if you remember Joey Buttafuoco, everybody remember that was Baldwin, Long Island. That was where I grew up. Complete auto body. So it was the complete auto body. Joey Buttafuoco's auto body shop. There was an attic upstairs, and somebody called me and said, "You better get here right now. There's boxes and boxes and boxes of comic books, and nobody knows who they are, and they're going in the garbage." I was like, you know, by the time I got there, they were already gone. I was like, "You're pulling my leg, right?" He was like, "No." He goes, "We don't know." He goes, "We thought it was the guy who owned the comic book store down the road, but nobody knew." So by the time I got called, by the time I got down there, they were gone. So I don't know if they existed, what was in there, or whatever. But there you go. Joey Buttafuoco stole my comic books. That's the story that I'm going with.
You can comfort yourself by thinking maybe they were all like extreme comics from the 90s, or
it was all Richie Riches. That's how I have to tell myself. I remember watching the original Universal Monsters on Peacock back in 2020, and I loved how the monsters end pretty abruptly. Yeah. So you said you were a Marvel guy?
Yep.
You never got into DC?
DC didn't have a lot of new number ones. How I got into comics really was when G.I. Joe was on TV and they were doing the commercials. I mean, I had comics when I was a kid, but I would go every day to the newsstand to try to get G.I. Joe #1. And the newsstand kind of got sick of me because it was basically for old guys to go and buy like Hustler and Playboy. So they didn't have time to talk to me about their spinner rack of comic books. And so I wanted G.I. Joe #1 so I could start at the beginning. And the problem with DC books is they were all, you know, in the 200s, 400s, whatever. And I didn't want to start there because I didn't think I'd be able to follow along. But I did get Blue Devil because that was like the first DC #1 that came out when I started collecting. So I collected Blue Devil for a long time.
It's funny that you said that because when I got into comics, I just bought whatever comics caught my eye, you know, and when I got into Fantastic Four, it was George Perez drawing it. So of course I was, you know, I loved it. I looked forward to it. And my friend started explaining to me, it's like, "Oh yeah, like this is the number 37. You got to get 36. You got to get them in order." But what is there was like a little 4-digit number on the top. I'm like, "What does this mean?" He goes, "I don't know." So like I just saw numbers on comics and they didn't mean anything. And then he started explaining like every month is a different. So, and just around that time, Spectacular Spider-Man #1 came out. And I stopped buying Amazing Spider-Man because I was like, it's already up to like issue 194 or whatever. I'm not going to be able to get the back issues, you know, like the completionist and whatever.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
You know, so I always got Spectacular Spider-Man. And then I remember when Web of Spider-Man #1 came out. I was like, I got to get another Spider-Man. Like I was like enraged that they were scamming me, you know, like, so I refused to get Web of Spider-Man. It wasn't until like 125 before I went to eBay and I bought like 1 to 100. And then I got those 25 issues. I don't know. I just remember just being like, I just stubbornness. I wasn't going to collect Web of Spider-Man because Marvel was scamming me. You know, how many Spider-Man comics do they need? Well, apparently how many Batman comics do they need?
Like what you said about the numbering, like I didn't understand, like it would say August and then it would say 4. I thought, oh, this comic came out on August 4th. I didn't realize August was the month and it was issue #4.
Right.
So I went every day to get G.I. Joe for months. And when I finally found a copy, it was G.I. Joe #4. And so I had missed the first 3. And so I was kind of ticked off about that. And so then I started going every day to get #5. And I was like, when's this going to come out? Because I thought they came out, you know, like on the 4th and the 12th. I didn't understand the numbering. And so I got G.I. Joe 5 and I was like, well, I'm in here every day. I want to try something else. And John Byrne's Alpha Flight number 12 was there.
Oh,
the
that's
bright
a
pink-
rough issue to start collecting on.
Yeah. And so I had like 2 issues of G.I. Joe, and then I got Alpha Flight 12, and that comic blew my mind because they, spoiler for a 30, 40-year-old comic, but they kill Guardian in it. And like, I was like, they kill heroes in comic books. And so then I had to get, all of Alpha Flight. That was the only time I filled out one of those mail away for Mile High Comics. And I ordered like Alpha Flight 1 through 7, I think. And I started collecting that religiously. And then they would have, like the Hulk would appear in an issue or some other Marvel character. And then I'd be like, oh, I want to read more about him. So I'd get Spider-Man or Hulk or, whoever was guest starring in Alpha Flight. And then I wouldn't stop reading that one. I'd keep it. So I was collecting like G.I. Joe, Alpha Flight, Spider-Man, Hulk, and ROM, like Micronauts. Like it got to the point where I was collecting every Marvel comic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Except
At one point, I was
2 or
collecting
3.
every Marvel except G.I. Joe. I till this day, I don't have any G.I. Joe comics. Oh, Zach Tan Light would like to take issue. You spoiled the comic.
I'm sorry. It's okay. They brought him back multiple times with increasingly ridiculous explanations of how he survived.
I just got to address this. RJ Williams says, this is my second time checking in. You still hear what's going on? Every time RJ checks in, I'm ending. I'm like, good night, everybody. And then RJ checks in. So RJ, I don't know if you made it on time or if we made it off time. Whatever way you want to look at it, but it's good to see you here. Hey, Doc Blaylock, how you doing? Doc, wonderful comic creator. When are you coming back? Just read your comic. Throw your links in the chat there, Doc. So you're a comic creator now. You lived with Brian. You guys went to art school.
Yeah. Well, one of the comics I picked up, so I was an avid reader of comics, but one of the comics that I picked up was the New Mutants Special number 1 by Arthur Adams.
Oh, yeah.
And something about that, like there was a euphoria in my mind when I looked at the art, and that's when I went from wanting to read comics to wanting to make comics, because there was something about his line work, his detail. I suddenly wanted to know about the guy who made the comics, just not the characters. And so I was like, well, I want to track down and collect everything this Arthur Adams guy did. And at that time, he didn't have a huge body of work. So like I kind of collected everything he had done in a few months. And then I was like, well, who does Arthur like? And I had read an interview in like Amazing Fantasy or something where he talked about like Walt Simonson and Michael Golden. And so I'm like, well, I got to check out the work by these guys. And so I started to not only love comics and comic characters and the whole medium, I started to really become fascinated with the idea that you could do this as a job. And so I started drawing. I had always drawn. Like as a kid, my mom saved, like we didn't have a ton of money. So like we would get a Mego Batman, but I didn't have Mego Robin to go with it. So I would make, I guess you'd call them like puppets. I would draw out each individual body part, and then I would put them together with those little push pins that you push through, and then they split. So they would have joints. So I would make little paper action figures to complete my Justice League toy line, and my mom kept all those. And for a little kid, I think I did a pretty good job. There was some wanky anatomy going on with some of the characters, but so I was always drawing. In high school, I had a pretty serious girlfriend who, once we got out of high school, she kind of expected me to have a job if we were going to stay together. And so like the only thing I wanted to do was draw. And a friend of mine was like, hey, I just signed up for the Army on the GI Bill. And if you knew me in high school, I would be the last person you would think would go into the Army. I was an artist. I was a rebel. I was the class clown. I was a cut up. And the idea of wearing a suit and following orders just didn't really click with me. But
Did you do well in the military?
sort of. Like, the military is really hard, but it was one of the best decisions I ever did because it took a snotty-nosed brat and turned me into a man.
That's the point I'm trying to make is I regret not going in, and I was, you know, I was unfocused. I really didn't get my act together until I was in my mid-20s. You know, I was a big stupid, not spoiled, but like I was always working, but I had no focus. And when I went to college late, and I met friends who went to college late because they were in the military, and I just admired how like they were able to focus. You know, they had fun and they were goofy and they were great guys, but when push came to shove, you know, they got their act together, and it like by meeting these guys kind of made me get embarrassed. Oh my God, I'm 26 years old now, and you know what I mean. So I kind of, my point being is that I'm saying in a really awkward way is I think the military really did help so many people, and it's one of those things. If I could go back in time, I probably at 19 when I was at my most lost, I think I would have joined.
Yeah, it was really helpful. I mean, I came from a small town, and then suddenly I'm in the barracks with guys from all over the country. My first battle buddy was a guy from Africa who had become a U.S. citizen, and like my mind was blown by just how different people are in different cultures. And the military is great because it teaches you how to work with each other, be task oriented, to, you know, push through the pain.
What branch were you in? I'm sure you said it.
The Army.
Are you in the Army?
Yeah, I was in the Army Reserves. And you asked if it was easy or hard. I think about halfway through basic, me and my second battle buddy, this guy named Cameron, who our drill sergeants called us Miller Cameron blank 1 and Miller Cameron blank 2, except they didn't say blank, they used the F word. And so they would call us because they could, with glasses and your head shaved, everyone looks pretty similar. So they always got us confused. And about halfway through basic, we figured out they can't hurt us. Like this is all psychological.
Right.
So we made a pact. We said, we're going to mess with our drill sergeants' heads. So like when it would rain, we wouldn't go out for PT. They, you know, everyone else would cheer, and we'd run up to the drill sergeants and like, can we go out in the rain, drill sergeant? Can we go out in the rain? And so then we would just, you know, run the track. I had come out cross country, so I was a distance runner. So we'd go out and run in the rain. We'd dive and low crawl through the mud puddles, and we'd just come in totally dirty and, you know, screaming hoorah. And our drill sergeants were just like, "Dag, you guys are hardcore." Like, I remember the village of the tire people. It's where they teach you how to use your bayonet to stab. So they have like all these tires cut out like in people shapes. And then they would train you like, okay, right foot forward, step forward, thrust, pull back, turn, run. And so everyone else is like, you know, doing it like it's a dance step. We run up there like we're Rambo. We're like, die, mother hubber, die, 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 and slashing the throat and kicking them, and then run to the next one. And our drill sergeants were kind of freaked out by it. So mission accomplished.
I remember my father, he was in Korea, and he was in the Navy. And he said he loved it. He he was in boot camp, and he said he just like whistled. And my father, when he was daydreaming, he said he would be in day camp. He would be in boot camp, just going through everything. The drill sergeants or whatever be yelling around, and the guys next to him are like, "How could you be so cool with this?" This guy, he goes, "You live with my mother." He goes, "Just make your bed." He goes, "They tell you to do something, you do it, and make your bed." He goes, "That's it." He goes, "At least you know exactly what they expect." My mother, he goes, "You would do whatever she told you to do and still get yelled at because there's stuff that you didn't know." He goes, "This is a piece of cake. Live with my mother for a while." Yeah, my grandmother never smiled. Never smiled in her wedding picture. She was like this. an old angry Sicilian. So he goes, yeah, you live with an angry Sicilian. Day camp. I keep saying day camp. Boot camp is a vacation compared to my grandmother. So what out of the military, you went to art school?
Yeah, out of the military. Then I went to art college. About halfway through the freshman year of art college, I found out the Army wasn't as forthcoming with providing the GI Bill as they said. Like, I took all these student loans, and then you're supposed to fill out this paperwork when you go to drill, and then they make a payment on your student loan. And they just never paid on my student loans. They didn't give me the GI Bill. Like, it was some paperwork snafu where I'm in art school and suddenly I have loans that the government's not making payments on. So I had to get a full-time job, a part-time job, and the Army just to pay for, like art supplies and stuff. Brian and I actually started selling blood platelets so we could,
I did that.
Get, like $15 at the beginning of the month. And then I think there was like a bonus sometimes. So sometimes we got like $30 and then we'd go buy comics and art supplies with our blood money.
There was a blood platelet place right by my school. There must be one near every college because they know that everybody. Yeah. And speaking of fainting, the very first time I did it, I got up and right on the ground, and they told me I couldn't come back. So I just waited another month and went back, but it was like free money, It
was always full of college students and winos.
It was the brokest people, drunks, homeless people, college students, and we would take that money, and that put me in top ramen for the month. I talk about that a lot. The 90s were my brokest years. I probably bought comics literally with my blood back then. Yeah, that's funny. I will say that the college also bought something else that we tried a few times. That didn't, but that was too restrictive. But I'll leave that to your imagination.
Yeah, probably better not said.
Yeah. So, I know Brian went off and did Wolf and Batsy. He started with like Viper Press, and then I can't think of the other company. He met Josh Howard. You had a comic for a while, right? Or were you published, or did you go right to what's your art history?
So sophomore year, I actually dropped out of art college because I couldn't keep up with the loan payments, bringing on more debt. The Army never seemed like they were going to make good on their end of the deal. And so Brian and our other roommate, Brian, so I lived with two Brians, they finished art college, but I continued to live with them. And I'd like look over their homework. Sometimes I would do Brian's watercolor homework for him because I like watercoloring. That's like one medium I'm really comfortable with. And so I got the whole college education. I just didn't pay for the last 2 years. And then after college, Brian, a guy named Dave Hartman, who you've probably heard Brian talk about, and we started our own little, like, I guess they were called zines. Like, we just went down to Kinko's and made our comics. But
that's so punk rock.
We each had a title, and we had the publishing title we gave it was Freak Show Comics. And so we had these 3 titles from Freak Show, and then we went to conventions and sold them for, like, I don't remember, $1 or $5 for our little zines, and just started to get to know people in the industry and figuring out, what we wanted to do with our comics. Brian moved to California after we had lived together. I don't know, we were roommates for like 7 years or something.
That long? Wow.
For a really long time, to where my parents were worried, like, they're like, is there something you want to talk to us about? And it's like, you've lived with this guy for 7 years. It's like, I'm like, well, what are you talking about, Mom? And it's like, no, we're not gay, Mom. It's just
Brian is, but not me.
right. So he moved to California to go into animation. Him and Dave actually both did. I just couldn't afford to do that. And I was working in a restaurant, and there was a local toy company in Columbus I heard about. And so I had a friend who knew someone there and said, hey, you should go in and interview. So I took my portfolio in and interviewed for a junior toy designer position.
Oh, cool.
And they had a line of dinosaur toys. These guys that they were doing, and my portfolio was full of dinosaurs and angels. So they had a line of angels they were looking at doing. They actually were pursuing the license for Touched by an Angel, if you remember that show.
Yeah.
So
Romer Jr.
Yeah.
Not Romer Downey, but I always had the Junior just to be funny.
Yeah. So my first job was like designing, like a Barbie and Ken, whatever the male angel was. But that line of toys never went through. Like, when you work in toys, you realize 95% of stuff you work on never gets made or produced.
I can imagine.
So I started working there part-time, and then they brought me on full-time. And so I got to work on like...
That's so cool. You got to design some dinosaur toys?
I did paint designs on them. I didn't sculpt. And the vice president of the company was a guy named Mike Compton, who is a phenomenal artist. And so he was like published in, like real magazines. I'm not sure if he was in National Geographic, but his work was well known. So he did all the actual dinosaur designs. And I was really drawing comic book dinosaurs at that time. Like, I hadn't discovered like anatomy and how to do them accurately. So I'm doing, the big wonky T-Rex with its legs all splayed apart and a tail that wiggles like a snake, and all anatomically incorrect stuff. And but it would look good enough for comics. So they didn't have me design the dinosaurs, but they had me come up with the paint schemes of what colors they were going to be. But that was fun because when you work on toys, like they're bigger. Like, so for this guy, like, he came from a mold where he was like this big.
Oh, wow.
So I had to paint him. And so I did a lot of those. And then from that, we did Street Fighter, and we started getting into video games. We did Quake, Duke Nukem, Crash Bandicoot, Gex. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, they were like lizards.
Yeah, that thing almost killed me because the molds when you pulled him, his scales wouldn't line up because it's like a 2-part mold. And so I mean, there was like a month of my life just pulling these Gex out of the mold and then like looking at all the scales to see if there was, a hairline difference. And then,
oh, wow,
the scales line up, but there's an air bubble in his tail. I got to do another pull. And then that toy line never came out. So.
Yeah, I got Deliverance. It's over there. It's actually the second Kickstarter for the first game. The Deliverance game, it's angels, like it's virtues versus vice. So I backed it right away. And I think the designers kind of toned down that it was like a Christian themed game. And then once people started playing it and saw that it was a Christian theme, the demand went through the roof, and they're doing another Kickstarter. So
yeah, I heard really good things about that game.
It looks really great. I got to take it out of the shrink wrap.
I see you, Madness Comic Network. You say you're the Midnight Toker.
Yeah, he's.
I always tell everyone they get one Steve Miller Band joke, and then I cut them off. Yeah. And most people they just use it up real quick, and then by the time they have actually,
I did it in the introduction, got it over with right away, right away. Do you ever? Do people ever? When you say Steve Miller, do they ever? Are you the musician?
There's actually a website called Steve Millers who are not the Steve Miller.
That's funny.
There's a lot of famous Steve Millers. Like there's a fantasy novel cover artist named Steve Miller. And so I actually got approached to do a Star Wars book cover because they thought I was this other Steve Miller. And so like I did it, like I did the cover and I sent it to them and they were just like, you're not the guy we thought you were. And so I used to.
You're not the Steve Miller we're looking for. You should have did it with the Jedi. Last Friday night, I went out to Manhattan, and as I'm walking out of the restaurant, some guy goes, "Are you the actor Mandy Patinkin?" I was like, "No, I'm not." So there you go. That was the first and only time people have mistaken me for other people, but never Mandy Patinkin before. I can't even say his name. I saw Steve Miller in the 70s when he was Steve Miller.
Before he had the band.
Heroic Tales. Oh, I was going to say Heroic Tales. Yeah, there we go. This is my comic. It's still live on Indiegogo right now. If you back it now, you might even get it before. No, it's ending in 10 days. I'll probably get the comic and start shipping it out. I'm hoping by the end of next week. So I used to say but if you back it digitally, you'll have it in 20 minutes.
Well, it's worth it. I've read it and it is a great first issue.
Thank you. And I gotta say, guys, if you're working on your own comic, get physical proofs. You know, a lot of things I missed looking at the print at the digital files, and then when I had it in my hand, I'm like, oh, that's a mistake.
Yeah, there's something special about when you get the physical thing in your hand. Like when I did books and I would get a book, like they'd send me a big box of books, and it's like, whoa, this has gone from something in my head and on my computer screen to now something in the real world.
You must get that with your toys. Are there any toys that are entirely your babies, like you sculpted them, or?
I don't sculpt. Like the toy I'm probably most proud of is Aqua Crash Bandicoot from, I think, the first line of Crash Bandicoot toys we did. The toy company I worked at, it was a great place to work, but at the same time, it was a horrible place to work because everyone else who worked there were childhood friends. Like they had all grown up together.
Oh, and you're the one guy who's not in the clique.
Well, it's worse than that. They had a spot for one more designer. And so I went in and interviewed, and they had one of their buddies, their last buddy they wanted to bring on the team, and he interviewed. And I got the job because I drew better. And so then not only was I not one of their buddies, I was the guy who kept their buddy from getting a job. And it was, the two owners were Christians, and I was the only Christian employee. And so they figured I was a spy for the man. So they would keep stuff from me. And like, I remember the first day of work when I was like full time, like it was the tradition to take the new guy out for lunch. And so we all drove to, I think, Fuddruckers, and I pull in the parking lot, and they all in their cars like whip out and they drive, get on the outer belt. And so I'm like, oh, this is fun. It's a little game. And so then I followed them and we went to like Wendy's. And as soon as I pulled in, they would pull out, and they did that until they lost me. And so I go back to work and I was like, that's kind of odd. Like, what were you guys doing? And they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And so they would just do silly little reindeer games to try to get under my skin.
I was working for, I'm an electrician. I was working for an electrical company, and they would do, like underhanded stuff. And I went there as an apprentice, and my brother was a bigwig in the union. So they all just assumed that I was a spy. And it was the same thing. I would walk in at lunchtime, sit down. And as soon as I'd sat down, I would open up my lunchbox. Everybody else would get up and go to another room. And like they had a job that was literally the next building over from where I lived. And I'm like, oh man, that would be the best commute in the world. Just wake up and walk to the next building over it. They just refused because that job they were doing some underhanded stuff. Like they were mad that I even found out that we were working there. But how could I not notice it? I would see our truck in front of the building, and I was with them for 4 years because they were, oh, a cat just showed up. They were afraid to get rid of me, but nobody. There's nothing worse than going to work and just knowing that you're the odd man out. Like I'm not joking. Nobody would talk to me. Yeah, it was rough. The only good thing was I worked for Marvel Comics during that time. They were happy. They would send me to Marvel Comics, and I would do, but nobody would talk to me. I was the odd man out. It was, and then like when they got a lot of work, they would hire like temporary people, and the craziest, dangerous, the guys who would just start cutting wires. That guy would be my partner. Oh man, so I feel for you working, and you're the whatever the schlep,
Yeah.
the one.
I remember I walked in one day and they had drawn like a life-size caricature of me, and they were all standing around throwing knives at it.
Oh God.
And I was like, man, this is not good.
That's rough. How long did you stay with that?
I was there like 3 or 4 years. The company wasn't well managed, and they went out of business. But it was a good learning experience, like because I was the big comic book guy there. We were in video games, and Spawn Toys, McFarlane Toys were like our number one competition. So we were always trying to, like, we got the Sleepy Hollow Headless Horseman movie, the Tim Burton one.
Oh
like,
yeah,
we got the license for that, and then Todd, through some less than scrupulous business dealings, pulled the license out from under us, and so we were always in like competition with them. And so our owner was like, "You're the comic book guy. Like, track down some popular comics that we could do." So we did Tony Daniels' The 10th. I don't know if you remember that comic book. It was sort of Tony Daniels.
Tony Daniels
now at D. Yeah, this was like his earliest work, like right after X-Force, and so we got his 10th, which was a big like.
Yeah, I remember the 10th. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, big pit-like character.
The temp, like the temporary. Okay, the 10th.
Oh,
yes,
no.
I remember that. Yeah, it was an Image comic.
Yeah, so we did that, and then afterwards, we were supposed to follow it up with, like, I had talked to Joe Madureira, J. Scott Campbell, Humberto Ramos. Like, we were going to try to do the Cliffhanger line.
Oh wow, that would have been great. Sexy Danger Girl toys or Battle Chasers or something.
Right. So I designed the whole Battle Chasers toy line.
Oh wow.
But Joe Mad had like a friend who supposedly did toys. So he's like, no, I'm going to go with my friend. And those toys never came out.
Yeah, I would remember it because Battle Chasers, Divine Right, and Danger Girl, and I think Gen 13 were like the only Image comics that I was actually excited about. The rest of them I could take or leave them.
Yeah.
So that, if there was Battle Chaser toys and I didn't know about it, I would be mad.
And this was right after, well, it was a couple years after Eric Larson had done his Playmate line of Savage Dragon toys, and he wasn't really happy with how those turned out or how he was treated. So I approached Eric Larson, and he said we could do Savage Dragon toys, and that's where I met Arthur Adams. Like, I contacted Arthur Adams to see if we could do Monkey Man and O'Brien toys, and that was like one of the greatest days of my life, is because, like, I think I was skateboarding. Like, our toy company had its warehouse connected to the studio, so you had to go through like the offices, and then you went through the warehouse to get to the studio. And so we all rode skateboards back and forth through the warehouse, and I'm skateboarding through the warehouse, and over the loudspeakers there is like, Arthur Adams is on hold on line 3 for Steve Miller. And I was just like, ah!
Oh my God, that is awesome.
So
and I will also say I love Monkey Man and O'Brien, and there's like less than 5 comics of that. It was a great premise, great. Of course, the art is outstanding, but whatever happened? Whatever happened to Monkey Man and O'Brien?
So there's the Monkey Man O'Brien action figure and the Monkey Man O'Brien sculpture.
Oh wow! I was wondering what that was because from my point of view, it looks like Thanos in an alternate costume. Because it's got that squat. Wow.
So I had to talk to Arthur on the phone, and I'm like, be cool, be cool. This is
don't act like a fanboy. Don't act like a fanboy.
Yeah, and I'm just like barely can talk. Like, hi, Mr. Adams, and he is.
Please tell me he was cool.
Arthur is the coolest guy in the world. Good.
I get nervous when people meet people that I like, and then they're like, "Oh, he was a jerk." No, it's a good. Arthur Adams was cool. He looks like a cool guy. I actually chickened out of talking to him at a convention because I got all fanboy geeky.
Yeah. So those line of dinosaur toys I was telling you about, Arthur is huge into dinosaurs, and so we did an Allosaurus, which never got produced. But I took one of our paint masters and I sent it to him just as a gift, like to say, hey, I love your work, and I love dinosaurs. And so I don't know, he drew this for me.
Oh wow, is that the Gill? Oh, that's like dinosaur people.
Yes, it's like his version of the Gill Man.
Yeah, with the sexy Gill girl, because if you're gonna have a girl, you gotta have a sexy Gill girl monster. That is awesome.
Yeah, he asked me, what do you want me to draw? And I was like, could you draw the creature from the Black Lagoon and maybe a sexy girl wearing a creature from the Black Lagoon as armor? And he was like, funny you should say that. He's like, I've been working on something just like that. So that showed up, and I mean, that's one of my most prized possessions.
So that's an original Arthur Adams that nobody else has.
Yep.
Oh, that is awesome.
And I'm not allowed to display it because there's too much skin. My wife's like, take that down. We don't need to see her dirty bits. So,
well, she just got out of the water, honey. They're clean.
But now it's in the podcast room, so I can put up whatever I want.
That is so cool. Yeah.
But Arthur him and his wife Joyce, they're just the nicest people in the world. So, I had met Arthur at a show before this, and just got a signature and shook his hand. And then the next time I saw him at a show, he actually knew who I was, and it was so cool because he was like, "Hey, Steve," and just brought me back behind the table, and he's talking to me, introduced me to Joyce, his wife, and I've seen him at 3 or 4 shows, and he always remembers me, and that astounds me because he meets thousands of people at shows, but he always takes the time to say hi, and he's just a great guy.
So whatever happened? What the toys were never made, huh?
No, the 10th toys didn't sell really well. They should have been bigger because the 10th was a big guy, and then our sales team figured out if they reduced the figures by 10%, the shipping would go down, the production would go down, but then they were no longer in scale with any other action figures.
That drives me nuts when I used to collect action figures. I have tubs and tubs and tubs of action figures in the garage because I got no place to display them. And that's just one of the things when they're not in scale. Like I got Kirby style original X-Men, but they're like baby size compared to the other X-Men. And I know they're supposed to be teenagers, but they look like preteens next to them, and it just drives me nuts. So I have to put them on, like when I displayed them, they had to be on different sides so that you wouldn't notice that they weren't in proportion. So yeah. Toy collectors, because let's face it, little kids aren't buying 10th, and little kids aren't buying, premium Spawn. It's adult fans that are buying them, And I don't even know if I rip everything out of the package, put it on the shelf, So,
yeah, I'm the same way. I have thousands of toys, but they're all out of package because, they're almost all out of package. I guess I don't have any in package up here, but there's a few that Reaction Godzilla. I got every color that came out. It's like a small version of the Shogun Warrior Godzilla with the firing fist. So they put them out.
You pulled the switch and his tongue a fiery
Right.
tongue would come out of his mouth.
And that switch always broke off, and everyone always lost the fist that fired. But I still have mine. It's actually out in the garage.
It's complete. Do you have the switch?
It doesn't have the switch, but I made the switch took up a lot of space on the back, and they skipped a scale. So I made like a fake scale I could put over it.
There you go.
So it looked better.
Yeah,
One of the perks of working at a toy company and having, loads of plastic and paint to work with.
yeah, and oh wow! Do you have a 3D printer?
No, I'm holding off because I like new things, and then I get heavily into them, and suddenly I'm buying all this technology and everything that goes with it, and it takes away from time from drawing. And my wife is like, "You don't need any more stuff."
Right. I don't need any more stuff, but Amazon, there was the Mars Elegoo Pro 2 3D resin printer. It was $400, and it was one day only for like $189.
Sorry, my cat's eating something that's not.
Oh, don't eat anything.
So
So I printed up 3 things. I've had this thing now for 2 years. I printed 3 things: Ultimate Nullifier in case Galactus attacks, a Deathly Hollows thing for my wife, just so she's like, "Why did you print?" Here's a Deathly Hollows. Oh, this is pretty cool, and it actually prints and spins. That impressed me. That this thing actually 3D prints. And then I printed I can't even remember something, but $189 to print 3 things. I don't know. I thought I was going to use it so much. I actually paid for a file now to get the Patriarch, and I haven't heard back from these people. So I got a message him. Where's my file?
Yeah, there's a whole website of like free stuff you can.
Yeah, Thingiverse. That's where I got
Thingiverse.
I got the file for this. I know a couple of people that could sculpt, but it takes a long time, and they want to be reimbursed. I don't blame them.
Right.
So
Yeah, sculpting's expensive.
yeah, I had the entire Where the Wild Things Are toy toys collection, and I have them away like an idiot. Yeah, I love the Where the Wild Things Are. Oh, I gave them away. Okay, I gave them away.
Yeah, a few years back, our basement flooded, and I lost a lot of my toys, and I lost thousands of dollars worth of comic books. Like, I lost all my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh God.
I lost the entire run of Spawn, which I have the trade paperbacks, and that's not such a big loss, but like the Ninja Turtles hurt. And at some point I just stopped going through the long box and just threw the whole thing out because I didn't even want to know what I lost.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts. I live in fear of like a house fire or a flood to the point.
Your mind can't even comprehend it. Like, I walk down into the basement and it's like, why are my feet wet? And it's like, there isn't supposed to be a pond in my basement. It's like, and it's like in a sitcom, stuff is floating by your laundry baskets. And
how deep?
It got, I'd say about 11 inches deep.
Oh God. Yeah. Cause when I bought this house, I hired an engineer to check out the basement, and this engineer said there's not a drop of water has ever been in this basement. And one of the things I wanted, I'm pointing over here, I wanted a bathroom down here, because I wanted to host board games, and I don't want people needing to go upstairs. So since it's below the waistline, there's 2 options. You could drill a hole into the concrete and get like an electric pump system underneath the toilet, or you could get this that goes behind it, and there's like a little machine. Either one of them is an electric pump. So I opted for the one that doesn't compromise the structural integrity of the basement, because I
have to throw my cat out of the room.
Oh, poor kitty. So I'll finish my toilet story for anybody who's interested. So I actually got there's like a mechanical little machine behind my toilet. So all your goods go into this box and then get shoved up into the waistline and then out, because I didn't want to cut the concrete, because it's this house was built in 1968. There hasn't been any moisture. I'll be the jerk that breaks it, and then something will come up or whatever. So, but
Yeah.
I got moisture detectors down here. You know what I mean? I'm just so afraid. And then a guy that I worked with, his house burnt down to the ground because his kid left his iPad plugged in
Oh
on the
gosh.
You know what I mean? So like when I go to bed, I unplug everything. I unplug my phone, I unplug my iPad. You know what I mean? Like I just, I'll go to work and I'm like, call up my wife. Did go downstairs, make sure that the iPad's unplugged. Things like that. Like I'm becoming obsessive. Like everything I own is in this house now. And the house is just like, when you do your own work on the house, you become very aware of how much your house is just a wooden box.
Right.
When
Okay. Yeah, that was a lot eye-opening life change experience for me. I stopped collecting at that point when I realized, it's just all material stuff, and if your sump pump fails, you can lose everything. So, I kind of stopped collecting comics as religiously as I had been. I still pick up trade paperbacks now and then, but I don't buy as much stuff as I once did. And plus, I'm older and I have just about everything I want. So.
Yeah, I still find stuff that I want. Like I kind of want to start getting GI Joe, but I think I'm gonna hold off until I catch up on the 18 or so long boxes of comics that I haven't read yet. There's no need to start collecting another thing. But you're working on a comic now, right?
Correct.
Because at 8:30 I got to go over on another channel. I have my comic book team up with RJ from the Fourth Age, so we've been talking an hour just fun stuff, talking about toilets and stuff like that. Let's talk. What are you working on?
So I'm working on a book called Thug, and we can share a picture. Do I hit present again, or is it still sharing?
You're sharing something,
side?
but so you have to stop sharing this and then repick. So
stop sharing.
There you go, and now you can share your image of Thug. And who is Thug?
All right. So let's go full size there. All right. So back in college, you were asking about if Brian and I made comics, and we started that company called Freak Show where we made our little zines. I did a character called George the Radioactive Guy. Like it was kind of like I was really into The Tick by Ben Edlund. Like I really liked the humor comics. So it was a little more on the funny side. It was about this alien who came to Earth, and on his planet, his family crest was the radioactive symbol. But he wasn't radioactive, but everyone was afraid of him. They thought he was radioactive because he had this big radiation symbol on his face. So I did that book, and I kind of created the whole narrative for Thug or George at that point. And I kind of came up with this huge story because I'm a bit of an insomniac. I have trouble going to sleep at night. So the way I go to sleep is I like write comics in my head. So I like kind of had this whole huge story that I wanted to do with George, but real life kind of got in the way. Like I had to find something that paid. I started doing toy design and stuff, and so that kind of got put on the back burner. I worked at Resource, the toy company, and then I worked at a animation company where they had me doing like storyboards and art directing and stuff. And I was supposed to do a video with dinosaurs in it, and I could draw, comic booky dinosaurs, but I was like, there's got to be a book for how to draw accurate dinosaurs, because every dinosaur how to draw book on the market was, draw a circle and connect it to another circle and draw a line, and they're really basic. And there was just nothing on the market like that. And around this time, Andy Smith's How to Draw Comics, well, I forget what it's called. It's not fantastic, but How to Draw Dynamic Comics, I think. And so I was like, there needs to be something like this for dinosaurs, for an artist like me who needs some solid artistic lessons in how to draw accurate dinosaurs. And there just wasn't anything. So I started to put that together for myself for this project, like going through National Geographic, tracking down like dinosaur skeletons, trying to figure out, okay, so, you know, their legs wouldn't be this far apart. Their legs were actually this close together, and figuring out how they would actually work. And I was like, if I'm going through this, there's got to be other artists who are going through this, because like I remember when Jim Lee had to draw dinosaurs in the Savage Land, like his dinosaurs were really cool, but they were again inaccurate.
Yeah.
And so
nobody picked up Devil Dinosaur and Moon Boy for accurate dinosaurs.
Right.
Yeah.
And at this time, I had also befriended Brett Booth online. Brett Booth, who's the current Spawn artist. And he's known for drawing fantastic dinosaurs. And he had a whole bunch of dinosaur drawings for sale on his website. And I bought them all. And I mean, they were like dirt cheap, like $40 per double page spread of dinosaurs. So I had all this great dinosaur art, and I sent it into Random House, their imprint, Watson Guptill, which is a smaller publishing house within Random House. And I said, I'd like to do a how to draw book like Andy Smith's how to draw book, but for dinosaurs. And they were like, oh, this is fantastic, but we hear about this furry craze. Can you draw anthropomorphic furry people? And I was like, I can draw anything. So it, like they always say, it's really hard to get published. I sent in my proposal on Tuesday for the dinosaurs. By Thursday, I had a contract for 3 how to draw books. I had the dinosaur one, my first book, which came out called Freaks, which was how to draw furries. And then I don't know what the third one was. Was it Scared that I did with Brian? Or there might have been another one in there. But so anyways, I started doing all these how to draw books, and they kind of took off. And I wanted to do how to draw giant muscle men books, like, you know, the Hulk or the Thing or Pitt, like the big muscle guys. And so I started to put together that book, and I dusted off all my old George the Radioactive Guy drawings. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can rework him into this. And going through the pages, I was like, oh, I remember why I liked this guy. I kind of fell in love with him again.
That's cool.
And so like I started to read what I had written down. I was like, wow, that's actually still, like, if I get rid of all the sophomoric humor that I had put in there, there's actually a pretty good adventure science fiction superhero romp in there. And so in George the Radioactive Guy, the catch was I never drew his face. Like, he always had the mask. And my idea was in the last issue of that, I would reveal his face. And so in working on this Muscle Man book, I said, well, I can't just draw a faceless guy. So I got to figure out what George looks like. So I created a face for him. And I was like, well, George the Radioactive Guy is sort of a dumb name for a serious character. And so he had several names. Like I would come up with a name and I'd be like, oh, he's going to be Behemoth. He's going to be Brute. He's going to be this. And then I do a copyright search and like everything's taken.
Tell me about it.
And so I knew I wanted to follow sort of the soft consonant, vowel, hard consonant pattern, like for Hulk, like, you know, end on a hard note. And so I was like, what's a simple, forceful word? And I came up with thug. And I researched it, and no one had thug. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do it. It's going to be thug. And it's like, it might confuse people, but because everyone's like, oh, you're writing a comic thug. Is it about, like, you know, one of Joker's henchmen, like one of the unknown, nameless, you know, low-level bad guys? And it's like, no, actually, he's a big muscle guy. But I always tell people it's like he's like the Savage Dragon if he had the Iron Giant's brain. That's how I describe Thug. It's like he's this big warrior guy, but in his brain, he's not. Currently, at least, he's not on the death and destruction path. And if you remember in Iron Giant, it's not till he gets hit in the head at the end by the military, and then the Iron Giant turns into this big war machine. And
yeah.
and Thug is sort of the same way. I'm trying to be cautious and not give away too much of the plot, but
Yeah, once you start talking, don't you just want to tell everything?
right.
I'm terrible at that.
I actually have a notepad here where I've written down things I'm willing to disclose and things I'm not going to let John get out of me. So,
Yeah.
but
Do you have an art share you want to show?
what's that?
Do you want to show an image or anything?
Yeah, isn't it sharing?
No.
All right, let me try it again.
Go to
Present.
present. Yeah.
Share screen. Allow.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now I can
Yeah,
add this stage.
It must time out after a while.
There we go. There's the Thug.
Yeah, there's Thug. So he's a big blue green. And I researched this. There is
Brian's here.
Hey Brian. There is no large muscled teal character currently on the market. So it's funny. Thug started out as being red because I created him before there was a Red Hulk. And so while I was working on that how to draw book, Marvel put out the Red Hulk, and I was like, I can't make him red. So I searched all the colors. There's a big purple guy, a yellow guy, and teal was the color that no one had touched yet. So I took teal, so that's why he's teal.
He looks like a cross between the Toxic Avenger and the Hulk.
Yeah. The Toxic Avenger, especially like the Playmate toy line. Well, nope. Don't neglect your daddy duty. Your daughter needs you.
Please make a glow in the dark toy. There you go.
Well, actually, his eyes glow in the dark because I've worked in toys for so long. When I'm designing something, I'm also thinking, okay, how do I make this toyetic? How would this work in a toy line? So, like, I have those ideas, and like his eyes glow in the dark naturally. Like, I want to do a cover where I just, spot varnish glow in the dark over his eyes.
Cool.
But then you see the radioactive symbol in the back, which is inverted, and that's actually George's old mask. And so everything I had planned to do with George is now I'm going to do it with Thug, and I'm going to do it much better because I used to draw pretty poorly, and I'm actually comfortable with how I'm drawing now to where I don't hate everything that comes out of my pencil.
Well, one thing I learned is that all artists are their worst critics. There's not one artist that I know that's just like, yeah, that is just so good. They all want to tweak with it. They just don't because time is against them.
Yeah. And then you draw it and, it's off your desk. And then a day later you look at it and you're like, oh, I got to go back and change that. And so I'm learning to just let things go. There's actually pages in the first issue of Thug, which are old pages from my George comic where I've just blue lined them and then re-inked them and fixed things. And it's like, man, I can't believe I used to think I knew how to draw.
Well, I could talk for another hour, so please come back. But I really got to stop because I got 10 minutes before I got to be on another show with RJ. If you go to YouTube, The Fourth Age, I'll be on with RJ in 10 minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah, but come back and we'll talk more about the Thug.
We'll actually get into the comic.
We'll have Brian tell horrible stories about you, and you tell horrible stories about Brian, and
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, but pleasure. I'm glad I met you, man. I enjoyed talking to you. We talked like an hour or so the other day. Just figuring out how to do the live stream just to make sure that it would work. But I enjoyed it. You're a good guy to talk to.
Well, this is the first stream I've been on. Like, I built this podcast room when my son moved out, and it's like, okay, I got to start streaming. And it's like, how do I do that?
Yeah. It's a learning curve. If you go back and watch my early videos, where guys like, okay, share this file, and I'm like, share? What do you mean? I was literally holding my phone like this. What is StreamYard? Huh? Yeah, so good. Yeah, see, you already got up. But I have to go. So I'm gonna say sayonara, everybody. I'm gonna say Heroic Tales is gonna be in your hands in I don't know, a couple of weeks. I got a little tweak that I gotta fix. We're gonna after I'm done with RJ, I'm gonna fix that tweak and then start printing. And how long before Thug do you think will be out?
February is when I want to have it finished. I have 18 pages left to draw, but then I have 60 pages to color. So
Are you going to crowdfund it?
yeah, I'm going to crowdfund it.
Also,
But
definitely come back. I'll help you promote. I enjoy doing that. It's a lot of fun.
yeah, well, once it's a little further along, I'll definitely come back and I'll have some more colored artwork to show.
Cool. But thanks a lot. But I'm going to get going, and I'll see you. Yeah, definitely come back. I'll help you promote. February, I'll probably be promoting Heroic Tales #2, so we'll be frantic, helping everybody
Great.
out.
Thank you,
Thanks a
John.
lot, everybody. Bye-bye. I got to think of a sign out.
Bye-bye.
Like, up and away or something. I don't know. What's a good sign? It's about comics. There you go.